On August 12, 2014, at 6:30 p.m., 23-year-old Laura Mercer disappeared without a trace while hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado. 5 years later, an exhausted woman walked into the Boulder Police Department claiming to be Laura. She knew the smallest details of her past and had all the physical characteristics of the missing woman, yet the results of an official DNA test showed the impossible. Everyone was shocked by this. What unfathomable mystery did the DNA test result actually conceal, and what horrific truth lay hidden behind the 5 years of the girl's disappearance? You'll find out in this story. The events in this story are presented as a narrative interpretation. Some elements have been altered or recreated for storytelling purposes. August 12, 2014, in Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado, was unusually hot. The air was dry and still, and the sun, slowly sinking toward the Grace Peaks, bathed the granite cliffs in fiery red hues. It was at this very moment that 23-year-old Laura Mercer, a journalism graduate preparing to enter a master's program, decided to go on her last hike before returning to school. For Laura, the mountains were never hostile territory. She grew up in Boulder, knew the local trails like the back of her hand, and often told her parents that she felt closer to herself at the summit than anywhere else. At around 5:30 p.m., Laura locked the doors of her parents' SUV in the parking lot near the Twin Sisters Peaks trailhead. According to later accounts from other hikers, she appeared calm and focused. She was wearing a light blue long-sleeve shirt, gray hiking pants, and professional hiking boots. Laura planned to climb one of the peaks to watch the sunset alone and make it back in time for dinner, which Susan and Mark Mercer had promised to have ready by 9 p.m. According to Susan Mercer, whose statement was later recorded in the official Boulder Police Department report, she felt a strange sense of unease that evening, even before the clock struck 9. She recalled that around 8:30 p.m., the air in their rented house near the park suddenly felt too thick, and the silence unnatural. When Laura didn't show up at 9 p.m. and her cell phone displayed only a brief message indicating she was out of range, Mark Mercer decided to drive immediately to the trailhead. The parking lot was nearly empty. Laura's lone car was parked exactly where she had left it, but the girl herself was nowhere to be found. Mark tried calling out to his daughter, peering into the darkness of the forest that was rapidly engulfing the foothills, but the only response was a hollow echo bouncing off the rocks. At 10:15 p.m. that same evening, the National Park Service officially filed a missing person report. The search operation began at dawn on August 13, 2014. Ranger reports indicated that 58 volunteers, 8 search dogs, and 2 helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras were involved in the search. The Twin Sisters Peaks Trail rises to an elevation of over 11,000 feet above sea level, and its landscape consists of dense coniferous forests that give way to steep scree slopes and deep ravines. Detectives who interviewed Laura's friends learned that she was not one to take risky routes, but she had one special spot she called the Nest of Silence, a small rocky outcrop on the southern slope offering a panoramic view of the park. It was there, 3 miles off the official trail, that rescuers found the first evidence on the 4th day of the search. On a steep slope, where the soil had been washed away by recent brief downpours, lay Laura's sunglasses with a noticeable scratch on the left lens. A little further down, wedged between the roots of an old fir tree, one of her sneakers was found. The most chilling detail was the clear skid marks on the wet ground, leading straight to the edge of a deep ravine that locals called the Gray Maw. The head of the rescue team, Detective Harris, noted in his report dated August 17th. The nature of the tracks indicates that the subject lost her balance or tried to grab hold of the surface before sliding down. The depth of the Gray Maw at this point exceeds 300 feet, and the bottom is strewn with sharp rock fragments and littered with fallen tree trunks. The next 2 weeks became a time of unbearable waiting for the Mercer family, bordering on madness. Rangers attempted to descend into the gorge several times, but constant rockfalls and unpredictable weather conditions made every attempt deadly dangerous. The official investigation concluded that it was an accident. Investigators speculated that Laura, engrossed in photography or simply watching the sunset, had strayed too close to the edge of the eroded slope. A fall from such a height left no chance of survival, and the body could have been buried under tons of rock and sand during subsequent landslides. Laura's parents refused to believe it. Susan spent her days at the park's information booths, handing out flyers with her daughter's portrait to every tourist. She recalled how, a few days before her disappearance, Laura had talked about her plans for graduate school and how she wanted to write a series of reports about people who find peace in the wilderness. Now that very same wilderness had become a stone trap for her. By the end of September 2014, the active phase of the search had been called off. In police records, Laura Mercer's case was classified as missing, presumed dead due to an accident. Mark and Susan returned to their empty home in Boulder, where every item reminded them of their daughter: her unfinished essays on the desk, a book left open on the nightstand, and the blue long-sleeve shirt she hadn't had time to change out of before dinner. They lived in a state of constant numbness, waiting every day for a call that might bring at least some certainty. Months passed, and then years. Snow blanketed the twin sisters, melted, and once again covered the peaks with a white shroud. Mountain trails changed, trees fell from old age, and the gray maw remained silent and impenetrable. In the memory of Boulder's residents, Laura Mercer remained that sunny girl who had vanished forever into the last rays of an August sunset. Her name occasionally appeared in local newspapers on the anniversary of her disappearance, as a reminder that the mountains do not forgive mistakes. Yet no one, neither seasoned detectives nor grieving parents, even suspected that Laura Mercer's true story did not end at the edge of that ravine, but had only just begun in a darkness the civilized world would prefer never to know. August 23, 2019, turned out to be rainy and unusually cold for late summer in Boulder. Exactly 5 years and 11 days had passed since Laura Mercer disappeared in the Rocky Mountains. The case had long been classified as cold. Active searches had not been conducted for several years, and the girl's name was mentioned less and less frequently in police reports. However, at 7:45 p.m., the doors of the Boulder Police Department opened, and a woman walked in, whose appearance caused the officer on duty to forget his duties for a few seconds. According to later testimony from Officer David Miller, which was recorded in the report that evening, the woman looked like someone who had just survived a catastrophe. She was wearing a dirty, oversized men's flannel shirt and worn-out jeans that stayed up only thanks to a makeshift rope belt. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her hair, once Laura's pride and joy, now looked dull and unevenly cut. But the most unsettling thing was her gaze, glazed, empty, filled with the deep shock usually seen in people after prolonged isolation or severe trauma. When Officer Miller asked the woman how he could help her, she remained silent at first, merely clenching her fingers convulsively, beneath whose nails caked-on dirt was visible. Then she stepped closer to the counter and, in a quiet but surprisingly confident voice, uttered a phrase that instantly brought the entire station to its feet. "I am Laura Mercer. I managed to escape." The officer's first reaction was justified skepticism. In the years since her disappearance, the station had been approached on numerous occasions by people with mental disorders or con artists trying to pass themselves off as the missing heiress of the Mercer family. Officer Miller recalled that at first he mistook the woman for one of those homeless people seeking shelter during the rain. However, her composure and demeanor compelled him to follow protocol. The woman was escorted to an interrogation room where she showed no signs of aggression or confusion. 30 minutes later, Susan and Mark Mercer arrived at the station. According to eyewitnesses, Mark was holding his wife's hand so tightly that his knuckles had turned white, and Susan could barely stand. When the door to the interrogation room opened, a heavy, almost physically palpable silence fell over the hallway. The scene that unfolded next, according to the detectives, was so emotional that no con artist could have faked it. Susan Mercer looked at the woman for only a moment before a muffled scream burst from her chest. She rushed toward her, ignoring the dirt on her clothes and the unpleasant odor emanating from the girl. With trembling hands, Susan brushed a strand of hair from the girl's neck and saw a small, dark brown mole there, identical to the one her daughter had. Then the mother knelt down and rolled up the girl's pant leg. There, on her left knee, was an old scar, the result of a bicycle fall when she was 10 years old, known only to family members. According to Detective Harris's report, who had been watching the meeting through the glass, the girl began to say things that finally dispelled any doubts. She recalled the last thing Mark had said to her in the parking lot before she walked down the path. "Don't forget to look at the stars. They'll be special tonight." She named her first toy, a worn-out blue teddy bear named Barnaby, which she kept in a box under her bed. Every detail, every hidden memory matched the real story of Laura Mercer. Forensic experts who, that same evening, conducted a visual comparison with old photographs and the results of a photofit compiled by experts 5 years earlier, confirmed. The physical description matched 100%. Despite exhaustion and the effects of aging, this was the same Laura who had disappeared in the summer of 2014. An atmosphere of genuine wonder reigned in the station. The police officers who had previously believed Laura had perished in the Gray Maw were now shaking Mark's hand, while Susan didn't let go of her daughter's hand for a second, as if afraid she would vanish into thin air again. Detective Harris noted one strange detail in his notes. While her parents wept with joy, Laura remained almost motionless. She returned their hugs, but her body was tense, like a spring ready to snap at any moment. Every time a loud noise echoed down the hallway or a door slammed, her whole body would jolt, and her gaze would momentarily turn wild, like that of a cornered animal. She repeated only one phrase: "He doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm still there." Around 10:30 p.m., the woman was transported to the Boulder Medical Center for a full examination. Doctors were to assess her physical condition, which raised serious concerns: critically low weight, signs of vitamin deficiency, and numerous small scars on her arms, the origin of which she refused to explain. The police posted a guard outside her room, since officially she was now not just a missing person, but a victim of a serious crime whose abductor was still at large. The night after Laura's return was the first peaceful night for the Mercer family in 5 long years. They had finally received an answer to their most pressing question. Their child was alive. Rumors of a miracle in the mountains began to spread throughout the city, and journalists were already drafting headlines about an incredible return from the dead. However, the euphoria that swept Boulder was fragile. While Susan and Mark sat in the hospital hallway, planning how they would rebuild their daughter's life, the medical center's lab had already begun preparations for the standard official identification procedure. The joy and sense of a nightmare finally ending lasted exactly until the evening of the following day, when the first test results landed on the desks of the chief medical officer and the police chief. Results that, instead of answers, brought a new, even more chilling mystery. The morning of August 24, 2019, at the Boulder Medical Center, began with a procedure that was supposed to mark the formal end of the Mercer family's 5-year nightmare. At 9 o'clock in the morning, a forensic lab technician took biological samples from a woman who called herself Laura for an official DNA test. According to hospital records, the procedure went smoothly. The woman remained quiet, almost apathetically, only occasionally gazing out the window, beyond which loomed the peaks of the very mountains where she had disappeared 23,000 days ago. For Susan and Mark Mercer, this analysis was merely a technical detail. They had already accepted their daughter into their hearts, recognizing in her every feature, every gesture, and every memory. However, in the Colorado justice system, emotional recognition has no legal standing. In order for the missing persons case to be officially closed and for Laura to regain her status as a citizen, scientific confirmation of kinship was required. The results arrived at the police station and the chief medical examiner's office at 5:30 p.m. that same day. Laboratory report number 842 was supposed to be the final chapter in the story, but instead it became a genetic verdict. In the column Probability of Kinship between Subject A, Laura Mercer, and Subjects B and C, Susan and Mark Mercer, the figure was 0. According to the dry numbers of the analysis, the woman sitting in room 412 had no genetic connection to the people she called her parents. She was a complete stranger to them. Detective Harris later recalled that when he first saw the results, he thought there had been a technical error or that the test tubes had been mixed up. However, the lab confirmed. The test had been conducted twice on 2 different machines, and the result was identical. The girl's genetic profile did not match either her mother's or her father's lineage. The atmosphere at the Boulder police station changed in a matter of minutes. The sympathy the detectives had felt for the kidnapping victim instantly turned into cold professional suspicion. In the world of criminalistics, there was a term for such cases: the perfect imposter. The police began to consider the theory of an extremely complex and well-planned blackmail scheme. According to this theory, an unknown woman had spent 5 years studying Laura Mercer's life, her habits, family secrets, and even her physical characteristics, so that at the right moment she could appear and claim rights to the family's property and financial assets, valued at several $1,000,000. At 7 p.m. that same evening, Detective Harris summoned Mark Mercer to his office. According to eyewitnesses, Mark emerged 10 minutes later, looking as if he'd been punched in the face. He refused to believe the documents, shouting that he knew his child and that no piece of paper could override what he saw with his own eyes. However, the law was unyielding. The police were obligated to act in accordance with the information they had received. The medical center's security officer noted in his report that security around Laura's room had been stepped up. But now the goal was not only to protect the girl from a possible attacker, but also to prevent the potential criminal from escaping. Detectives began urgently pulling records from all psychiatric hospitals within a 500-mile radius, searching for patients who might fit the description of Laura 2.0. It was speculated that the girl might have undergone plastic surgery to achieve such a striking resemblance, although doctors had not noticed any signs of surgical intervention during the initial examination. The logical question all investigators were asking themselves was, how could a person who looks like Laura, has the same mole on her neck and the same scar on her knee, have someone else's blood? It seemed like a biological absurdity. One of the sheriff's deputies suggested that they were dealing with a professional actress who had undergone extensive psychological training. The August 24th investigation report stated, "The available DNA test results completely rule out any biological relationship between the subject and the Mercer family. It is recommended that the subject's status be changed from victim to suspect in aggravated fraud. Further questioning is necessary to establish her true identity and motives for infiltrating the family." While the police prepared new questions, Susan Mercer continued to sit in the room, holding the woman's hand. The nurse who came in at 10 o'clock recalled that Susan was quietly singing the very same lullaby that Laura had loved as a child, and the girl was singing along with her, not missing a single word. From the outside, it looked like an idyllic reunion, but to anyone who knew the test results, the scene seemed like the height of cynicism and acting on the part of the stranger. The contrast between what the family's eyes saw and what the geneticists' microscopes revealed created a real rift in Boulder. Local news outlets had already begun reporting the story not as a miraculous return, but as a major genetic hoax. Any trust in the woman had been shattered. 5 years of searching, thousands of dollars spent on volunteers, and the parents' endless prayers now seemed trampled by cold scientific truth. By the end of the day on August 24th, The situation had reached a dead end. Standing before the detectives was a woman who remembered every moment of her life in the Mercer home, but her own cells denied her existence. The question of who she really was, the victim of a sophisticated kidnapper or a brilliant manipulator, became central to the investigation. The Boulder police were preparing for a tough interrogation the next morning, unaware that they were only beginning to plunge into a whirlpool of events where ordinary logic is powerless, and what they took for lies would turn out to be just the tip of the iceberg of an incredible human tragedy. Friends, before we continue unraveling this mysterious case, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and like this video. This is extremely important because YouTube's algorithms will help promote this episode so that as many people as possible can watch it, and Laura Mercer's story receives the attention it deserves. Thank you for your support. On August 25, 2019, at DD, the atmosphere at the Boulder Police Department had finally lost all traces of compassion. Interrogation room number 2, where the woman who called herself Laura Mercer was being held, was a small room with bare light gray walls and a metal table bolted to the floor. The bright fluorescent light highlighted every wrinkle on her face and her gaunt skin. Detective Harris, who just 30 hours ago had personally helped Susan Mercer up the stairs, now sat across from the girl with a folder containing the DNA test results lying between them like an insurmountable barrier. According to audio recordings of the interrogation, Harris began the conversation in a harsh, accusatory tone. The police were certain. Before them was a professional manipulator who had somehow gained access to the Mercer family's private archives. The detectives demanded she reveal her real name, accusing the woman of aggravated fraud and attempting to seize the family's property. However, the woman, who looked much older than her 28 years, only pressed herself harder into the uncomfortable plastic chair. Witnesses among the station staff noted that the girl had developed a pronounced nervous tic. Her right eye twitched spasmodically every time a door slammed in the hallway or the sound of footsteps echoed. Despite the pressure, she continued to insist on her story. Shivering from the cold, even though the room was warm, she repeated over and over, "I'm Laura. I don't know why the papers say otherwise, but I am Laura Mercer. I escaped from hell." When Detective Harris asked for details about her captivity, the girl began describing things that sent a chill down the spines of even seasoned investigators. She wasn't talking about iron chains or basements in the traditional sense. According to her, for years, she had been under the yoke of invisible shackles, psychological pressure that was stronger than any lock. She described her abductor as a man without emotions, a creature whose voice never rose above a whisper, but whose presence filled the entire space. According to the girl's statement, recorded in the protocol, the kidnapper could stand silently in the corner of the room for hours, simply staring at her with his cold, unblinking gaze. She recalled how this paralysis froze her body, preventing her from even moving. "He stood there so long that I began to wonder if he was even breathing," she testified during questioning. The sound of his footsteps was the most terrifying thing for her. Every time it became too quiet in the interrogation room, the girl would instantly close her eyes and pull her head into her shoulders, waiting to hear that specific, measured sound of soles on the wooden, a sound that, in captivity, always signaled the end of her brief respite. However, the key piece of evidence against her in the investigation was a medical examination, the results of which arrived at 11 a.m. Dr. Sarah Thompson, who conducted the full examination, noted in her report, "No fresh scars, bruises, or marks from ropes or shackles were found on the patient's body. The skin is clear, with the exception of old, minor scratches typical of spending time in a wooded area. The absence of signs of physical violence over the stated 5 years is anomalous for cases of forced confinement." Detective Harris used this fact as his main leverage. According to a reconstruction of the dialogue, he asked her directly, "If you were held by force for 5 years, if you claim you were tortured, where are your wounds? Why is your body clean?" The girl simply covered her face with her hands, trying to hide from his gaze. She could not explain that the torture was different, that her wounds were sleepless nights, constant fear, and a sense of being watched that did not disappear even at the police station. The investigators suspected that she might have been part of a cult or had been hiding voluntarily all these years, crafting her alibi. They pressed her with question after question. How did she know about the scar on the real Laura's knee? Who taught her the details of family conversations? Who gave her an identical mole? Every time she tried to explain that these were her own memories and her own body, the detectives pointed to the negative DNA test result. By 2:30 p.m., the girl was on the verge of complete nervous exhaustion. Her answers grew quieter and quieter, and her nervous tic became more intense. The Boulder Police Department was already preparing documents to formally charge her with fraud and misleading the investigation. They believed that every minute spent on this woman was time lost for the real investigation into the disappearance of Laura Mercer, whom they now once again considered dead. However, while this brutal psychological battle was raging in Room 2, a young medical intern from the health center, where the tests had been taken earlier, appeared in the department's hallway. He held an additional report in his hands, one that had initially been deemed insignificant. His arrival went unnoticed by most of the staff, but it was this very document that contained information capable of either crushing the girl once and for all or becoming her only ticket to salvation. For now, however, she remained within the metal walls of the interrogation room, crushed by the suspicions of those who were supposed to protect her and by the invisible shackles of the past, which, as it turned out, held her far tighter than any steel chain. But outside the window, the first clouds of a new storm were already gathering, a storm that would bring answers no one in the state of Colorado was ready for. August 26, 2019, was to be the day of the official filing of charges. In the district attorney's office, documents were already being prepared to open a criminal case regarding fraud and attempted embezzlement of the Mercer family's funds. Detective Harris, according to the records from that morning, insisted on the woman's immediate transfer to the Boulder Detention Center. To law enforcement, she was a nameless subject, a professional actress who had exploited the parents' grief. However, at 9:40 a.m., Dr. Lawrence Vance, a leading geneticist at the medical center where the tests had been conducted the previous day, entered the police headquarters. Dr. Vance was a man accustomed to trusting only numbers, but Laura Mercer's case had kept him awake all night. In his official statement, which later became part of the court records, he noted that the woman's visual identity and her deep-seated memories contradicted the blood test results too strongly. He hypothesized the improbable, something that occurs once in several million cases in medical practice. According to the medical examination protocol, Dr. Vance insisted on conducting additional tests, but this time he demanded various types of biological samples, not just blood, but also epithelial cells from the inside of the cheek, skin samples, and several hair follicles. While the police were preparing handcuffs, a process was underway in the medical center's laboratory that would turn the entire investigation on its head. The result was phenomenal. At 11:15 a.m. on August 26, 2019, a report landed on the sheriff's desk that would go down in Colorado's forensic textbooks. The woman was found to have a rare genetic anomaly, chimerism. This meant that two different sets of DNA coexisted in a single organism. One set, belonging to her unborn twin who had been absorbed in the early stages of pregnancy, had formed her circulatory system. It was this foreign code was what the first test revealed. However, the second set of DNA, found in skin cells, saliva, and hair, matched Susan and Mark Mercer's genetic material 100%. The scientific explanation was indisputable. The woman whom detectives had tortured for hours with suspicions in the interrogation room was Laura Mercer. She was not a phantom or a fraud. She was the very same girl who, 5 years ago, had gone to watch the sunset at Twin Sisters Peaks. A mistake in biology had nearly cost her her freedom a second time, but now it had become the key to her true return. Detective Harris later recalled that the moment he read the report, a heavy, almost physically palpable silence fell over the station's offices. All the excitement of catching the criminal instantly evaporated, leaving behind a bitter aftertaste of shame. The detectives who, just an hour ago, had been yelling at Laura, accusing her of lying, now didn't even dare to walk past the room where she was sitting. They realized that in their pursuit of the truth on paper, they had wasted precious time attacking the victim instead of searching for the real monster who might have been right nearby. According to the station staff, Harris personally entered the interrogation room at noon. He didn't offer any explanation. He simply brought her a glass of water and a warm blanket. Laura, upon seeing him, shrunk back into her chair, expecting another round of accusations, but the detective merely said quietly that a mistake had been made and that they now knew the truth. That moment became the point of no return. From a suspect, she had once again become the sole witness, whose words were now worth their weight in gold. For Laura's parents, this scientific confirmation was a moment of painful realization. Susan Mercer, recalling that day, said she felt a wild mixture of joy and rage. She was grateful to science for bringing her daughter back, but she was horrified that the police had only continued to torment Laura by interrogating her instead of helping her. Mark Mercer demanded an immediate review of all police actions over the past 24 hours, but Laura, according to doctors, was too exhausted for any conflict. However, the realization that Laura was indeed Laura brought a new, even more terrifying question. If she hadn't gone into hiding voluntarily, if she wasn't part of a scheme, then where had she been for the past 5 years? Who had kept her in conditions that left no physical marks but scorched her soul? The police realized that the kidnapper was not just a random passerby. It was someone who could manipulate reality just as skillfully as nature had manipulated Laura's genes. The investigative team was urgently reorganized. Now it included the best specialists in tracking down serial kidnappers. They began reconstructing the day of August 13, 2014, minute by minute, looking for what had previously seemed unimportant. The detectives dug up old lists of volunteers, family friends, park rangers, and even neighbors in Boulder. They were looking for someone who had been close by, who sympathized with the Mercers, who knew every detail of their pain, and who, perhaps, relished that pain, standing just an arm's length away. In the sheriff's office, a photograph of Laura from her prom night reappeared on the large bulletin board. But now, next to it, there was no cheater label. There was an empty space for another photo, a photo of the person who had created this illusion of death. Despite the sunny day, a storm was brewing in the air over Boulder. The police knew, somewhere in the shadows of the Rocky Mountains, or even on the streets of their city, lurked the man who had played the role of God in Laura Mercer's life for 5 years. And now that she had spoken, he knew for certain that his time was running out. The investigation took a 180-degree turn, directing all its resources toward finding the shadow that had been hiding behind a perfect facade of virtue all these years. On August 27, 2019, the focus of the investigation finally shifted from the victim to her circle of acquaintances. After DNA analysis confirmed Laura Mercer's identity, Detective Harris and a team of investigators from the Boulder Police Department began a comprehensive review of the events from 5 years prior. According to an internal order from the sheriff, everyone who was in Rocky Mountain National Park on August 12, 2014, as well as those in the Mercer family's inner circle of friends, were subject to a full investigation. Investigators reviewed phone call records, social media activity, and old volunteer statements. It was while analyzing the lists of those who had been most actively involved in the search that the name of 29-year-old Adam Dalton emerged. At the time of Laura's disappearance, he was 24 years old. He was considered a close friend of the family, frequently visited their home in Boulder. and according to Susan Mercer, was one of the few who never stopped supporting them throughout the entire 5 years. However, behind the perfect facade of a devoted friend, strange and logically inexplicable facts began to emerge. An analysis of Adam Dalton's movements based on his bank card data and cell tower records from the past 5 years revealed a strange pattern. He regularly, at least twice a month, went on business trips to remote areas of Colorado. Most often, his route passed through the small town of Estes Park, located right at the entrance to the national park. Although Adam worked in logistics, the nature of his trips had nothing to do with his professional activities. The decisive breakthrough came on August 30th, 2019, when digital forensics experts gained access to Dalton's cloud storage. The IT department's report stated, "An encrypted archive exceeding 40 gigabytes in size was discovered, containing thousands of photographs of Laura Mercer. Most of the images were taken covertly from a great distance using professional-grade optics. The most shocking images were the last ones in the archive, dated August 12, 2014. They showed Laura Mercer in a parking lot near the Twin Sisters Peaks Trail. The photos were taken from inside another car just minutes before she set out on her fateful hike. Adam Dalton didn't just know about her plans, he was watching her every move. At the same time, detectives discovered an old payment in Adam's bank statements made on August 14, 2014, 2 days after the girl's disappearance. It was a bill for emergency maintenance of a security system at an abandoned private home near Estes Park. According to land registry documents, the house belonged to the Dalton family, but had been considered vacant for years. Why the young man needed to urgently update the alarm system at the abandoned estate during the very week he was helping Laura's parents search for her body in the canyons remained an obvious but as yet unproven fact for the police. On September 1, 2019, Adam Dalton was summoned to the police station to clarify details. According to the video recording of the reconstructed conversation, Dalton behaved unnaturally politely. He arrived in a pressed shirt, kept his back straight, and spoke to Detective Harris with a cold, almost mechanical calm. When asked about his trips to Estes Park, he gave vague answers, citing a need for solitude and nostalgia for his grandfather's home. Detective Harris later noted in his report, "The subject exhibits signs of high self-control and a complete lack of empathy." During the discussion of Laura's suffering and her possible captivity, Dalton's pulse, according to the bracelet's data, did not rise above 65 beats per minute. He used rehearsed, overly proper phrases. "I did everything I could to help the Mercers. It's a tragedy that has changed us all." When I asked him directly about the photos in the parking lot, he paused for just a moment, then calmly replied that he had simply wanted to surprise her and take a photo of her while she was hiking, but had changed his mind about approaching her. The complete lack of any emotion on the face of a man whose secret obsession had just been exposed made a depressing impression on the detectives. Adam cited a poor memory of events from 5 years ago whenever the questions became too specific. He behaved like a man who knew the limits of the law precisely and was confident that circumstantial evidence was insufficient for an arrest. Despite the suspicions, direct evidence of unlawful confinement was still lacking. The police could not obtain a warrant for a full-scale search of the estate in Estes Park based solely on an old bank transfer and photographs, since Dalton claimed he had collected the photos as souvenirs. However, the net was closing in on him. Detectives realized they were dealing not with an impulsive criminal, but with a methodical predator who had spent years building his perfect facade. According to one of the station employees who saw Dalton in the hallway after the interrogation, he stopped in front of the board with photos of missing persons and stared at an old photo of Laura Mercer for a few seconds. There was no remorse or regret on his face, only a slight, barely noticeable smirk of superiority, which vanished the moment he noticed the officer's gaze. As Adam Dalton left the police headquarters, still at large, a special operations team had already moved toward Estes Park to conduct covert surveillance of the abandoned estate. The Boulder Police Department was preparing a decisive move, realizing that every sound of footsteps in the corridors of the headquarters now echoed in Laura Mercer's memory, as a warning that the monster who stole her life might still be one step ahead. In the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, a silent race against time had begun, where the stakes were not only the truth, but also the safety of a woman who had returned from the dead just a week ago. On September 3, 2019, the investigation into the Laura Mercer case entered a phase that detectives later dubbed the deconstruction of the mask. While Laura was under the care of specialists at the medical center, a team of detectives led by Harris spent more than 48 hours cross-referencing old testimony from 2014 with Adam Dalton's new digital footprints. The results of this analysis revealed a manipulation strategy that had allowed the criminal to remain above suspicion for 5 years. According to new data from the forensic analysis of Dalton's computer equipment, he was not merely an active volunteer. Ranger reports from August 2014 noted that it was Adam Dalton who initiated the search of remote ravines located in the opposite direction from his family estate. Detective Harris noted in his report, Dalton was always one step ahead of the search teams. He skillfully directed the rescuers' attention to hard-to-reach areas near the Gray Maw, creating the illusion that the girl could only have died there while keeping her several miles away from the search operation headquarters. An analysis of his social media activity in the months leading up to Laura's disappearance revealed a pathological, almost clinical obsession. Dalton didn't just like every photo of the girl. Experts found over 200 screenshots of her posts in his cloud storage, where she shared plans to apply for graduate school and move to another state. To everyone, Adam seemed like an older brother, a reliable pillar of support for the Mercers, but digital traces indicated that rage was growing inside him. In his personal diary, found during a covert search of his workplace, an entry dated August 10, 2014, was discovered. She thinks she can just leave. She thinks I'll let her disappear to another city. A reconstruction of the events of August 12, 2014, based on the confessions Laura began making to psychologists, allowed the chronology of the crime to be reconstructed. That evening, Adam followed her car to the Twin Sisters Peaks parking lot. He climbed up behind her at a distance of about 100 feet, hiding in the shade of the trees. When Laura was left alone at the summit, watching the last rays of the sun, he approached her. According to Laura's testimony, Adam began talking about a future together and tried to confess his love, but his words sounded like a command. When the girl, frightened by his cold tone and sudden appearance, tried to pull away, Dalton used force. It was those traces of a struggle and dragging on the wet ground, which the police initially interpreted as an accident and a fall into the ravine, that were in fact the moment of the abduction. He held her captive in an old 2-story house near Estes Park, covering about 3,000 square feet. This building was the Daltons' family home, where Adam's father had grown up. For the past 10 years, the house had officially been considered vacant due to complex legal issues regarding the estate. The family did not want to sell it, but none of the relatives visited it, making the estate an ideal location for a hidden prison. Adam created an isolated world there, where he was the sole source of information and resources. According to Laura's statements recorded in the Rehabilitation Center's records, Adam did not use physical violence as his primary means of control. He did something far worse. He destroyed her connection to reality. Over the course of 5 years, he methodically convinced Laura that no one needed her. He brought her printed fake newspaper articles claiming that her parents had stopped searching for her just a month after her disappearance. He convinced the girl that the whole world considered her dead and that he alone, risking his reputation, continued to care for her. Adam would visit the estate during his fictitious business trips, which he meticulously planned in his work calendar. On these days, he played the role of the perfect husband, bringing Laura new clothes, her favorite foods, gifts, and books. He created the illusion of a normal life within the confines of a few rooms from which there was no escape. Each of his visits was staged as an act of mercy. Laura recalled that he could talk to her for hours about how hard it was for him to hide her from the police, making her feel guilty for her very existence. It was a subtle form of psychological sadism. Dalton relished his role as her savior. He knew her fears and dreams better than anyone, and used that knowledge to build walls around her that were stronger than any bars. When Laura began to doubt, he would grow cold and silent, simply watching her from his corner until she began begging him for forgiveness. As of September 5, 2019, the investigation had pieced together a complete picture of what had been happening behind the facade of the abandoned estate in Estes Park. The detectives realized they were dealing with a man who hadn't simply stolen a woman, but had attempted to completely rewrite her identity. However, Adam Dalton did not yet know that his perfectly constructed system had failed at the very moment he believed in his own invincibility. While he continued to live his normal life in Boulder, maintaining the facade of a loyal family friend, the police were already preparing an operation designed to put an end to this 5-year game of God and his victim. The clues he believed were safely hidden in the shadows of the mountains finally led the detectives to the door of his secret world. Laura Mercer's escape on August 23, 2019, was not the result of a sudden stroke of luck or a mistake by her captor. According to the psychological evaluation conducted after her release, it was the result of months of grueling, quiet, and extremely risky planning. While Adam Dalton remained completely confident in his absolute power over his victim, Laura methodically studied the vulnerabilities of the old estate in Estes Park day after day. She learned to distinguish the sound of his pickup truck's engine a mile before it appeared on the driveway, which allowed her to conceal any traces of her preparatory activities. According to Laura's own testimony, recorded by the Boulder Police Department, the key tool in her escape was a metal shelf bracket that she had managed to loosen and break off unnoticed back in the spring of 2019. For many weeks, while Dalton was at work or driving into town for groceries, she pried the window frame fasteners loose, inch by inch, in one of the back rooms on the second floor. Adam considered this window securely covered on the outside by decorative wooden panels, so he rarely checked its condition. The fatal mistake for Dalton occurred on August 23rd, when he left for a long 12-hour shift, leaving Laura alone. Using the prepared tool, the girl finally broke the latches and pushed the frame open. She jumped from a height of about 10 feet onto the soft forest floor, sustaining numerous bruises, but didn't stop for a second. Laura ran barefoot through the dense forest, guided only by the sound of the distant highway. She covered about 4 miles of rugged terrain until she reached the highway, where a passing driver spotted her, who then drove the exhausted woman to Boulder. Adam Dalton was apprehended at 3:45 a.m. on August 28, 2019. A SWAT team blocked his car at the Peak View fuel gas station, where he had stopped to fill his gas cans before attempting to flee the state. A witness to the arrest, a gas station employee, noted in his testimony that Dalton behaved surprisingly calmly. When the metal handcuffs clicked onto his wrists, there was neither remorse nor fear of justice on his face. Detective Harris, who conducted the arrest, recalled seeing only cold irritation in his eyes over the fact that his perfect project, on which he had worked for 5 years, had been irrevocably ruined by a minor technical error. The trial in the case of the State of Colorado versus Adam Dalton lasted 8 months. The prosecution presented irrefutable evidence, from genetic confirmation of Laura's identity to thousands of hidden photographs and the results of a search of the estate in Estes Park. The judge sentenced Adam Dalton to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing, Dalton never once looked in the direction of the Mercer family, maintaining the same mask of icy indifference that Laura had seen every day in her prison. For Laura Mercer herself, however, the real prison did not disappear with the court's verdict. Upon returning home to Boulder, the 28-year-old woman found herself in a reality where every sound became a threat. According to her therapist, Laura often wakes up in the middle of the night from the imagined silence of that abandoned house, which seems louder to her than any city noise. She still flinches instantly at the ordinary sound of a front door closing and subconsciously seeks her parents' approval for every minor action she takes. Susan Mercer recalled that her daughter can sit motionless for hours, as if her big brother with his unblinking gaze, which leaves her frozen in place. Laura's physical return was a miracle for the state, but the psychological walls of the abandoned estate in Estes Park will remain part of her reality for a long time to come. In the case files, this story is recorded as a case of unprecedented cruelty and manipulation. Laura Mercer managed to come out into the light, but the price of that escape was a sense of security lost forever and a suspicion of anyone who tries to get too close. This was not a story about a tragic accident in the Rocky Mountains, but about how easily a monster can wear the mask of a devoted friend and a trustworthy neighbor, while behind the closed doors of an abandoned estate, he methodically destroys another human being, confident in his complete impunity. Even today, with Adam Dalton behind bars, Laura continues her daily struggle to learn to breathe freely again, without fear of hearing her captor's measured footsteps behind her.